Hey,
Is it just us, Jason?
I hope not.
It'll be pretty if it's just you and me.
Huh?
It'll be pretty quiet if it's just you and me.
Well, I'm sure we can make it fun.
I'm sure exactly. Unfortunately, she's going to pop in and say hi, but she unfortunately has another business thing happening at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Go figure.
That's not unfortunate. You got business stuff to do.
So she's going to pop in and say hi, but she has to run and participate in that. So I'm going to
That's okay.
be representing today.
I love it. How's it going with the Burr?
It's it's going well. Like the ARV is just incredible. We're just so fortunate that the appraisal is looking like it's going to be so strong when we get reappraised. We're lucky. There she is.
Hello.
Hey, what are you guys looking at for the appraisal amount?
I'm sorry,
What are you guys looking at for the what do you guys think you're gonna get for the appraisal amount?
30 maybe something like
Wow. There
yeah
you go.
yeah. Considering we bought for under five, yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty good. And we only bought under five 8 months ago, 9 months ago.
June, end of June.
Yeah.
Looking good. Don't everyone's gonna start rolling in the next like 2 minutes. I swear. At least I hope. This will happen last time.
Sweet. All right, I'll try and come back, but
No worries. No worries. There'll be more of these.
yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Try and make it like try it's gonna be a monthly thing. So
How's the market in Halifax? Is it still really crazy
yeah.
strong? Like stuff going way above
Oh
asking?
yeah. I've stopped calling it crazy and just like I just look at it as the new normal. I can't it's been like this for a year now. I can't justify calling it crazy. And I find the more that I tell people it's crazy, the more people get the idea that this is an anomaly in the market. And I'm just the more I live with it, the more and more I realize this is probably just a new normal.
It can't be sustainable forever, though, Jason. It can't.
Well, and that's what everyone says. But I don't know, and it probably won't. But like I look at Toronto, Vancouver, and they've been climbing sporadically and aggressively for so many years in a row, and everyone's always like, well, when's the kickback? When's it gonna fall out? And I until we get an enormous amount of supply or the economy crashes, those are your bets. You either need 1,000, 2,000 homes to flood the Halifax real estate market to give us this inventory to make price points ease off, or the economy crashes like we had a bad economy in the early 2010s and everyone has to move out of the province to go for work. So it's going to be that's really what you're betting on with the Halifax real estate market. It's almost like what other factors are there, and I don't know because the other thing is immigration, which we keep setting new records every year.
Up 400,000 or something this year. So
That's what it's coming down to, and you're kind of like, what is? I was lucky because with the podcast, I get to talk to like some really cool people, and I got to have on the chairman CEO of Habitat for Humanity Nova Scotia,
wow.
and I had them on about a week ago. That'll release in end of May. But and we were talking about the market off air before we did the podcast. And hey guys. And we were talking about the market and he deadpanned it and goes, the market prices are gonna double in Halifax in 5 years. And I was like, that's bold. That's really bold. Like you can't just drop that mic drop. And the way he explained it was because they do low income supply housing for the Halifax area, they need to know what immigration is doing. So they talked to CMHC about the stats. And what I was told a week ago was that over the next 5 years, Halifax and Nova Scotia in particular is supposed to get 8,000 to 12,000 immigrants per year. So at best case, 40,000 new humans, at worst case, 60. And we only have, if you look at the stats as of like April 1st, there's only 423 single family homes in the market in all of HRM and maybe 500 condos. plus the rentals are hovering around 1% vacancy. So you're kind of like, where is the supply going to come from? That kind of makes this market calm down to ease it. But if you're getting that many humans, which like if we get 50,000 humans in the next 5 years, that's 5% of our overall population, and most of them are going to come to Halifax. We don't have any. I haven't heard of any major subdivisions coming up that they haven't. There's not clearing any. They're not breaking ground on any. There's proposals, but like, how long does it take to build subdivisions? How long does it take to build 1,000 homes? What builder's gonna?
You'd be surprised. My sister was working closely with Francis Fairs on King's Wharf, and she, but before that, she worked for, oh shoot, what are the guys' names that own the big seafood processing company down?
Oh, Clearwater.
Water.
But there's a property development arm of them
Oh, I don't know.
right now. Anyway, but it's amazing how quickly, you get out there to, Herring Cove and stuff like that, how it doesn't take very long for them to throw up another 500 houses.
Well, 500 is not going to solve it. You need a dent. You need a significant number. And also, like, can they throw them out right now if material costs at an all-time high? I just saw plywood are on for $100 or something, and and shortages. So you're like, it's like the perfect storm to have the housing market just do what it's currently doing, and you just watch it in amazement.
I walked into Home Depot and I saw a 2x4 for, I don't know, $20 or something, and it was just
yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah, it's a wild time. Hey everyone, I'm just waiting to see what how many people roll in the next few minutes. Cameron and Kaylee, I'm gonna probably start questioning you guys in like by like 10 after 11, and we can get the ball rolling. So Graham just asked a question about the Halifax market before everyone got on here, just saying it can't sustain itself, and he is right, but I don't know where it calms down in terms of like, when does the dust settle on this market? Because I mean, for all the investors in the room who live in Halifax, like I'm sure you can attest to it, it's quite fun dealing with purchases at the moment. Ian, I see your wife smile in the corner.
Yep.
I keep hearing stories about houses in Halifax going $150,000 and $175,000 over asking, and it's just.
I just saw one sell for 400.
400 over asking.
400 over asking in Fall River. It's nonsense.
Stop.
Oh man, the record keeps breaking itself every day. Like, it's like someone sets the bar and someone just goes, "Hold my beer," and just it's what it is.
Where was that one at, Jason?
Fall River.
Are
On
they
a lake, on a private lake, gorgeous home. I have to get the address again, but someone, just being a realtor, like, people love sending me what things are selling for, being with like the mind-blowing emoji, and you're just like, yes, this is the market. This is what I do. I see this all the time, and it always just escalates.
Are they just doing all cash? Like, how are they getting mortgages on
Cash.
something?
Cash. If someone's going $400,000 over asking, it's like, it's either they're paying half of it, they're paying the $400,000 in the cash and mortgaging the rest, because like banks are never gonna allow you to do that. They're not gonna offer financing through that method unless you go, like Andrew knows. Andrew's a mortgage broker. You know that, Andrew. Come on now, speak up.
I'm just tuning in, so I don't know what the subject is here.
We're talking about just the way the market keeps like outpacing itself every day in terms of price point. Like if we're talking about buying a house, 3 months ago I was telling buyers, okay, $80,000 opening statement. That's it. That's where you need to be. Now when I'm talking to a buyer who was on the phone with this morning, I was like, you want a house, it's $100,000 over asking, or don't bother. That's the price. And probably in May, June, I'm going to be talking about 115, because the way the market keeps going, our average house price went up 40,000 since January, I think, if I remember the stats. So it's just trying to figure out where the ball is and where you could try and finagle something, but there's no real room.
You mean in terms of lending with the bank?
Oh, in terms of lending with the bank, someone bought a house $400,000 over asking in Fall River, and Kaylee was just asking, that has to be cash. It has to be.
Yeah, unless the appraisal comes back and meets that evaluation, then they have to make up the difference in cash. Yeah.
If an appraisal comes back and says a $400,000 over asking is worth value, I'm asking the appraiser's
Well, it depends. If they listed it for 100,000 and it's worth 5, then it works. But if they listed it for 4 and it sold for 8, then the appraisal comes in at 5, then they have to pay the 300,000 difference.
Yeah. Appraisals are fun.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
doing one
fun.
on Thursday.
Yeah, and they're all backed up too. It's crazy. Because
Yeah.
every house is selling for over asking, so every house is getting appraised right now. So
Yeah,
appraisal
it has to.
companies are just backed up like crazy,
Unless they're cash deals.
unless they're cash deals, and they're doing like desktop appraisals now. So they're trying to approve people just based on online evaluations, and if that can be done, it's pretty quick. But if it has to be a full appraisal, like, and they have to go to the house, it's taking quite a bit of time to book them.
Every purchase I've done so far has failed the online appraisal, but passed the appraisal.
Yeah,
Every time. It's
yeah,
fails.
they can squeeze more out on the full appraisal.
And like you're watching the market, like when you're waiting for the appraisal to like, because like a sold's gonna come that's gonna support it. And like I've had to call appraisals like the morning of, being like, hey, did you see that one 3 streets down on the left? That sold for this price. We're better. Give me my number. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And they're always like, we're unbiased. And I'm like, fuck off. Come on. Give me the appraisal. Stop it. We're all on the same team here.
Yeah. Most of them are pretty good. They'll work with you if they can. But 400,000 over asking, that's a tough one to deliver on.
Unless you have cash.
Yeah, unless you have cash.
Which
Cash
like you don't write that offer unless you can like.
Well, I hope you'd have that conversation, with your client that,
You'd be shocked how many don't.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to mortgage that whole thing.
I think I've been waiting for just the room to fill up to see how many humans actually show up. I think I'm gonna jump right into this, guys. First off, thank you so much for everyone being here today. Special shout out to Cameron and Kaylee for taking the time as well. Welcome to the Halifax Real Estate Podcast Meetup. My name is Jason Paul. I am the host of the Halifax Real Estate Podcast. I have been a licensed realtor in Halifax now for 4 years. I'm growing. I'm old. I'm older now. For those of you that don't know, Cameron and Kaylee have been started their investment journey 2 years ago, I believe. Yeah. Little tidbit. Cameron was the first person to ever slide into my DMs as a stranger from the podcast, which is really fun.
DMs have never slid into.
Didn't even slide into my DMs.
Cameron was featured, for those of you that haven't heard it yet, Cameron was featured on episode 21 of the Halifax Real Estate Podcast about Burr. That came out Friday. So if you haven't heard it, we're not going to talk too much about the story behind it in a sense, because Cameron and I we go pretty deep into like the whole process from property to 1, 2, 3, and however many you guys have accumulated. But we're going to do probably a bit of, I have a couple questions I actually want to ask Kaylee and Cam that we didn't get to on the podcast. And then after, probably 20 minutes of that, I'm going to open up the floor to everyone to get their questions and answers in as well, because since everyone's here today, I really want everyone to get the most value out of this, and just regurgitating the same stuff that may have been heard on the podcast. This is why I wanted to pair the two together, so that people who listen to the episode can actually get their questions answered. So without further ado, thank you everyone for coming. If you do have a question, I'm just going to ask that you put it in the chat, so I can just say, I have a question. I can read out the chat. Maybe it's the easiest way to do it, so that humans aren't all talking at once. There seems to be more and more people rolling into this thing. So I guess, Kaylee, my first question is for you, because you weren't able to be at the episode that we recorded. So I guess my first question for you is, how have you found real estate investing to impact your life since you guys started your journey 2 years ago?
I mean, the biggest thing is just like the financial freedom it's sort of given us. Like, it covers our mortgage on a monthly basis. It covers all of our expenses. Like, we were able to, right off the bat in our first home, as Cam talks a lot about house hacking, but like our first home ownership, like our first home purchase, we were not worried or stressed at all about making mortgage payments. And I have a lot of friends in Ontario, like I'm from Ontario, so a lot of people who are in the Toronto market, they're buying their first home, and you hear them talk about how they, you know, can't go out as much, or like they're house poor and they have to sort of change their lifestyle. And we didn't have to do that at all. It's actually given us more freedom to do what we want and save and travel and.
But yeah, we had to like we moved from Toronto to get that house. It was like we actually came on vacation, and on one of the days we went and we looked at, I think, every single rental property that was on the market here in Halifax. And by the end of the vacation, we ended up having accepted offers. So we were battling like, what are we gonna do for jobs? How are we gonna make it out here? Like, Kaylee's like leaving her family in Ontario. So there's all sorts of other challenges to navigate. But
yeah, I think also growth in terms of like, you know, having the confidence to, you know that it's not that hard to just take on a new challenge.
Yeah,
which has been nice as well.
When you say it's not that hard to take on a new challenge, a lot of people really struggle with that concept. Like, so when you say it's not that hard, like I know as being growth minded, you have the mindset of always trying to figure out these problems. What, like, we talked about a lot about the problems you guys faced off on air with Cameron, but Kaylee, how did you find the first rental for you and your point of view in terms of what problems did you guys have to come up with and kind of solve that you didn't foresee?
I mean, I think the fact that we lived in our first one, so our first one was a triplex, we lived in the top unit and then rented out the other two. I think that helped a lot with any of the problems because you're right there. So, and we inherited tenants. Our first problem actually was the first person that we found to live in the basement didn't end up moving in. They sort of ghosted us. Thankfully, we had collected like rent checks when they signed the lease. So that's sort of, you always get rent checks when they sign the lease because you are entitled to that rent. Like, even if they sign the lease, it's a legal contract. If they decide to not live there, you know, that sort of, so I guess that was our first problem, was morally, how do you feel about depositing a rent check if somebody sort of ghosts you? But at the same time, like, it's a business you're running, you have to really just think of it as a business.
So morally speaking, you deposit the check.
We did, yes.
we worked with them and we found like a new tenant as soon as possible, and like we're really, you know, you got to work together in those situations to get for everybody.
Yeah.
We
didn't obviously deposit the second check.
No.
We found a solution. We let them out of the lease.
Yeah.
But, you know, when somebody sort of just on day one decides they're not going to live there, kind of left having to make that.
Who is beeping?
I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt, but who's got a beeper on? Someone's getting muted. That's a mute. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. And you guys have been able to, you guys are on your third burn now. You guys are currently taking the refi of your third unit, right? Yeah. And I know we're looking.
Yeah, we haven't taken the refi out on the third property yet. We're still sort of just turning through some updates on that one.
Yeah.
But working on the third one now.
Yeah, we are just in the process of refinancing our second one.
Yeah.
I love it. How's the
Halifax market has been really great. The refinance stuff.
Yeah, with the gains in the market you're seeing month over month, I imagine that it's been very kind for the refi process as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we were actually just able to refinance our first one without having done any renovations, like just because there's been such an appreciation in the market.
Awesome, amazing. Cameron, we didn't get to touch on this in the podcast because I was really conscious of sticking to the topic of BRRRR, but you touched on something that I really want to dig into here. Is you said you were a house hacking addict. So how do you view house hacking? And like, what would you consider that? And what would an example of house hacking be for you guys?
Well, I pretty much consider it as like any way that you're finding sort of creative ways to adjust your lifestyle or your sort of living accommodations to save on costs of what they would otherwise be. So like whether that's doing sort of a duplex or a triplex, living in one unit, renting out the others instead of living in sort of the full home, or where I started was just renting out my room. And it was actually like a sublet. Like I wasn't using it at the time. I was committed to my lease. I needed a place when I came back. So like, even, you know, if you think about it in its pure sense, like that in itself is kind of a house hack, because if you're not going through the effort of finding those people and setting up that situation for yourself, then you're at those costs. So we started with that, and then I was working on the road basically every week for a few years. And when I met Kaylee, it was kind of like I was coming back home to go change my clothes and go to hers. So then I ended up moving in with her and gave up that lease and moved in with her and her roommate. We got another apartment, and that also helped save even more. And then we had that friend move out, and we just basically marketed it as a furnished rental to another friend. So it just kind of like kept itself going. We got really comfortable with that. Like for us, it was neither here nor there. We enjoyed the company, and we didn't have any kids, or we had that sort of flexibility in our life. So
It
took
also
advantage of
it
it.
meant that we were able to live downtown Toronto and each pay $600 in
Yeah.
rent when everyone else was paying 15.
Yeah.
So that was huge in helping us start saving towards.
Yeah, that was like that's how we got really scrappy. And then it takes like kind of the discipline as well when you're finding those savings to not, you know, just leave them in your bank account and be like, oh, you know, I've got some extra cash to go to a Raptors game, or, you know, go out on the town for a bit. Like we were pretty disciplined about saying, no, this is going into the pot. And like I said, the snowball can roll pretty quickly when you start doing that. And we kind of never really stopped. Like even our place here, we're not really doing a burr in the way that we did the previous ones, but we're slowly trying to house hack it and set it up that way by changing sort of every little thing that we can ourselves here, slowly but surely. So it kind of evolves.
We have an Airbnb unit in our basement.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how we house hack here. Our Airbnb unit pays for our mortgage here and all of our sort of costs.
Which is incredible, because you guys, we didn't really touch on this in the podcast, but when you took the refi off the first property, you bought two properties, your triplex and then your dream home out in Hubli, which I've been lucky enough to see. It's private lake, gorgeous. You know, how many square feet is it?
It's like 4,500.
Or yeah, although that includes the unit downstairs, which we
yeah, able to Airbnb the basement out for. And how much are you guys seeing on the Airbnb now?
For a quarantine stay for 2 weeks, somewhere in the ballpark of about 1,750 to 2,100, depending on when people book.
Yeah.
For 2 weeks, so then multiply that by 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
We
how
haven't yet had like 2 weeks in a row, so we're probably sitting around 3,000.
Yeah.
Sorry, 3,000 a month. Like we'll usually get a 2-week quarantine stay and then maybe a weekend or a midweek stay.
Okay.
And
And how?
I think our earnings were about 4,100 for the previous, like our average so far since we've started, because the short-term stays have a higher nightly rate as well. So a little bit more headache to manage, but you get a little bit more. And sometimes it's nice to have some guests cycle through.
How has bookings been on the Airbnb? Just like you mentioned, the self-isolation mandatory stay. Have you found it consistent, inconsistent?
Yeah, pretty consistent.
Yeah.
The tough thing will be like this week, and this was a big learning experience for us. We had a week open, and somebody ended up booking like a Tuesday to Thursday, and somebody's not checking in on Friday. So I think it ends up being we have like 2 nights on one end and 2 on the other where there's nothing. It's like, but at the same time, like I think I gotta have another call with Avery and hear how Avery's playing with the toggles, because he's a wizard with that.
Even with that, though, you still make a lot more than you would if we were to just rent it out to somebody.
Yeah, you see a higher cash flow return with the nightly rentals than you would say for a longer term lease of over 3, 4, 5, 6, even a 12-month over year, which you guys have in your actual investment properties, right? They're 12-month leases per unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We well, actually, right now all of our leases are term leases.
Okay.
We had 3 that were starting in February, and so we wanted to get them onto a September cycle.
Yeah.
There's a school sort of nearby in that neighborhood. You know the neighborhood, Jason, where you are. February is a tough time to find tenants, or tougher time.
Yeah.
Curiously, Airbnb, there's been a lot of people reaching out for furnished rentals and long-term rentals.
Okay.
Quite a few.
Yeah, we actually, when we moved out of our apartment in that first triplex, we rented it out furnished.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So moving was a very busy time because we also had to find all new furniture for ourselves.
Yeah, but like you can I wouldn't recommend it, but you can always just throw a mattress on the floor and make do as you accumulate the furniture. And I know
We did a lot
Cameron,
of Facebook. We did a lot of Facebook marketplacing,
I was,
which
I
I
was gonna
highly
say,
recommend.
I was gonna say, I know Cameron speaks very high of Facebook Marketplace for
I do too. I'm like getting all my friends onto it.
Yeah, it's actually game changing.
When you're talking about when we're talking about real estate investing, the idea is to always get into wealth building, passive income building. So what for the people here that haven't yet pulled the trigger on their first investment property, what is some advice you could give them, or just some words of encouragement going into maybe they're thinking, maybe they're ready, maybe they're getting ready, like just something, just a way to share how it's profoundly impacted your lives, both professionally and just, in your day-to-day lives, to see that this is something you can do, and say this is something you should, like, this could seriously impact you in a very significant way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely, it's if you're kind of worried about getting into it, live in the building that you're looking to like buy. So live in one of the units and have it sort of cover your mortgage and help you. And that can just help you save up towards the next one too, because you have all this extra cash from not having to pay your mortgage. But sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay. Okay.
And I like that's we're obviously still trying to find some more properties like that one. I think like a lot of people here are. And
I remembered what I was gonna say. I was gonna say, if you're really worried too about like the actual landlording side of things, you can always get a property manager.
Yeah.
Like you'll still be making money, you'll still be paying some of your mortgage. Like it's not, I don't think it's something to be ashamed of or not consider, like to just get a property manager. Like just make sure that fits into the numbers, and that's somebody that'll help you along the way.
Do you guys have a property manager yet?
We don't, but we are starting to get to a point where we think we might switch over to that.
Yeah, I kind of did some property management while I was in university for some of my mom's stuff. So I had enough exposure that I at least felt like I could figure it out. So it hasn't been that bad, but again, we lived in the building, and so now that we're out of both buildings, it's a bit more work, but I think if you put in a lot of effort on finding good tenants, that makes that situation easier.
We're also too, like, this is just a side hustle. We both have full-time jobs. So it just can be, as you keep getting more units, it can be a lot to manage.
I think the one other thing I'd add, because like finding duplexes and triplexes that cash flow in a spot where you want to live now, if you want to live in the city, is becoming like harder and harder to do. If you're a little bit more bold and brave, another thing that I would encourage people to explore is like kind of getting away from the idea that you have to live in where you rent, especially if you're in sort of not necessarily going to settle down for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That you might be there in 1, 3 to 5 year period. It might make sense then to find a really good rental for yourself. And if you do have, you're really hot on the real estate market and you like that asset class, you can still go get a rental property, but maybe in a market that has better cash flowing opportunities, so you may not have want to move your life there. So
yeah, that's a good point. And then that cash flow would pay your rent.
Yeah, we've got a couple friends that are doing that right now and seeing some good sort of success through it too. They've just got really good lease situations with a low cost base, and taking advantage of that while they can, versus mortgaging right now, moving into a home, paying a little bit more.
Yeah, we have a friend, they live in this gorgeous house in the South End. They pay $2,100 a month in rent. They would never pay that in a mortgage. Their mortgage would be way more. So we keep being, and it's like a full house. It's big. We keep being like, just buy a rental property and let that pay your rent, and never give this place up. You move.
Yeah, it makes complete sense that for those people that have good rents in Halifax and live in a good area, why would you move out of that neighborhood if you don't want to move out of it for a simple sake of a rental? Like, for those of you that have been to and know about my living situation, I have an apartment on North End Halifax for $800 a month, and I'm going to keep it until I die. I'm not letting it go. And our first investment property is actually, we're looking at Ken Thor Truro, and that'll pay for the apartment, and I'll keep the apartment to live in while Anya, my fiance, wants to get into contracting and construction. So I'm just going to send her out to do the work, and I'll pay for it, but that's fine. One thing I love about your guys' story in particular is you mentioned something, it's a side hustle, which I just think is incredible, because you both work full-time jobs and you've been able to accumulate two investment properties, an Airbnb, and your dream home, create $12,000 a month in passive income off of these properties, all while maintaining a work-life balance in terms of like, I know I've hang out with you guys enough now to know that you do enjoy your weekends. Like, how was your scavenger hunt yesterday? Just for example, of like, you guys do enjoy your life. You're not too overwhelmed.
I'm feeling it today.
I'm feeling it today, are we?
Boozy scavenger hunt.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about property managers. Why do you think now's the time to move into a property manager? What's getting maybe a little too much to take on in terms of all the plates you're trying to juggle?
Well, I think the big thing is we're looking in Truro right now, and we're just sort of toying with the idea because it is, I mean, it's not that far, but if something were to happen with one of our properties right now, they're both 5 minutes from where I work. It's really easy for me to pop in and check it out. But if it was in Truro, it just might be a little harder for us to get to.
Might be able to hire Jacob. He's down there.
Been admiring your feed there for a while.
I know. How have you guys found it building the side hustle up to this type of scale while working your full-time jobs? Because a lot of people do struggle with that themselves.
That's my favorite part. Like Kaylee's, she's
Favorite.
laughing because like I just walk around the house and just like run my mouth all day talking and thinking about ideas now because there's so much on the go that what it's forced us to do is to get really creative about how we lean on experts to help us do the job, but also, you know, how can we do that in a cost-effective way because we can't do everything and because we've got a full-time job. You know, if I'm going to be tiling multiple backsplashes, I personally don't have the time to learn and then go do that and then do the bathroom, etc. with my day job. So it's been like really forced us to say, okay, how can you find people that you trust that do good work that you know are fair on price and I guess are predictable, I guess. So that way, you know, you're de-risking it. You say this is going to get done for this cost, and I've worked that into the calculations and know it makes sense. And then kind of that's how I guess sleep at night with some peace of mind is that I've sort of told myself I'm not going to be able to do everything. So there are things I need to say, you know, I'm not going to be able to do this nearly as fast or as good as somebody else, and just got to outsource it. I don't know. I'm a cost guy. My career is in operations, so it's all about trying to drive lean and efficient operations. And so I cringe at that sometimes, but I think it's the only way we've been able to do it and keep saying.
I think we're both lucky too because we have pretty flexible jobs. Like Tam works from home, and I work from home on Mondays and Fridays actually. And like I just have a boss that understands that if I need to run out to do a showing or something, like he's very understanding of that.
We get it done in the evening.
So hold on. So your current full-time job, your bosses know that you run investment properties and they're okay. Like if you have to run out to go deal with a tenant, they understand and are okay with that.
Well, like if I gotta get like I just get it done. Like it's got to get done. I'll have to open my computer up at 7, 8, 9. Like it's kind of shuffling it around a little bit at the end of the day. Yeah. And like what I mean about like leaning on people to help you when you don't really know. So we had this triplex that we just completely overhauled. And you know, we got a general contractor to come in and do the proper project management and like that. I'm sort of do a lot of project management. So I was like, you know, why am I paying somebody to go do all this stuff? But we'd never done that kind of a project before. Yeah. So it was really good to go through that learning exercise with them. And yeah, we ended up paying more than like I, you know, possibly feasibly could if I scraped everything off. But at the end of the day, now I have the confidence. Now I've got more of a heads up on what to look out for. I learned so much along the way. And so I kind of like see that as the cost of learning. And I think that, you know, that's just investing in ourselves and sort of some of that experience. So
that kind of lead into my next question. And this will be, guys, for everyone listening, this will kind of be like our last little segment before we get into Q&A. So if you have any questions you want to answer, feel free to type them in the chat now so I can start picking out which ones to ask Cameron and Kaylee. My last little insight I want to give for the audience is, as a realtor, when I meet investors, both first time, second time, or just looking to get into it, and they don't have that network yet of people around them to really help them go through property management, construction, renovation, redesigning a floor plan. How have you guys found creating that network of people to help take on the responsibilities and jobs that maybe you don't want to do, don't have the time for, or you just have to outsource because there's too much going on?
A lot of referrals, like everybody on here, like I've asked like a number of people here, and a lot of you guys have come through referrals too, which is really cool. And then trying a lot of people as well. So like right now, what we're doing with our house is we've got a number of contractors off of Kijiji who each sort of do some things, and some things better than others, and are just kind of letting them try, you know, some tiling here, changing the countertops here, hanging doors there. And by doing that, we're getting to meet a number of different contractors, understanding how they work, building that relationship, and seeing if it's something that, you know, we trust and continue to use them in the future. And then also because, you know, you can't just call a contractor these days and get in their schedule. So the more people that you can kind of have in that network, then, you know, the better off you'll be when you need to get stuff done.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to open up the floor now just to let everyone else, because I'm sure people are thinking of other questions they have to ask. Does anyone have a question for Cameron and Kaylee before you? Oh, Kirsty, if you have a specific criteria when looking for a BRRRR property. Oh, okay. Thanks for coming. I'm wondering if you have a specific criteria when looking for a BRRRR property or look for a specific monthly net income.
Yeah. We pretty simple. We're looking for at least $1,000 on like a duplex or a triplex. And other than that, like above a 6% cap rate. We're still trying to be able to make money on this. Like we're trying to build the cash flow. So for us, like those sometimes, I think Jason, you took us to a property there, and was it like Spryfield area, where I loved it. I wanted to buy it. Like I was like ready to make an offer, but it didn't hit that criteria. And I know that, you know, that's how we need to deploy the capital that we have.
I'm the voice of reason.
I was going to say, I think Kaylee stepped in with that particular property.
I still stand by it. It would be incredible.
I think too, like looking at the strategic renovations that are involved in the BRRRR, like are there things that you can do pretty quickly and inexpensively to spice it up a bit, or is it going to take a huge renovation? And just kind of knowing what you're looking to get into there.
Yeah, I'd like to have at least one, if not two, like augmentation abilities. So whether that's rents that are under market that can go up significantly, and you can actually do that, or like kitchens and that you could update one day and totally get like an extra bedroom out of it if you redid the floor plan, or an unfinished basement. Like those are things I look at, and it's like it doesn't necessarily have to be today, but that's something that could be an opportunity in the future when, you know, the opportunity and the cash is right. So those are the things where it's like, okay, yeah, it's great to get the cash flow, but when you get one of those on there, it's like that's when you know it's a definite, you're going to make the offer.
All right. So Andrew wants to know, you mentioned you enjoy the financial benefit of the Airbnb, but that also comes with more work. Will you consider investing into more Airbnb properties? Also, your thoughts on vacation getaway Airbnbs?
Love vacation getaway Airbnbs. If we could get the zoning for it, this place would be just full of the dome tents. I think, you know what, I'm surprised that it's not as much work as I thought it would be. We've got some great cleaners and a couple that we could call on backup. If once you kind of get the expectations set around how it looks, and if you keep the place decluttered, so you can be like really good design forward, but in a decluttered fashion, it makes it super easy to keep tidy. And for us, we have like a 6-person max, the 2-bedroom one. So it's not like we've got a 5 or a 6-person party house. Which has also made the turnovers and the guests just super easy. We barely hear them or see them. And I'm definitely thinking about like, where can you find some of those experiences next? And I think the keyword there being experiences, like you're seeing saunas and hot tubs. Like I call it Sensi Spa, and you couldn't book until like the end of the summer. And so Airbnb and you've got a sauna or a hot tub right there, like I think that's, you know, almost a license to burn money.
I went for a cold plunge in the lake this morning. So we have our own water spa.
No sauna here, but
we're working on the sauna. I would say too, like again, just don't be afraid to outsource. Like if you think that the Airbnb is going to be a lot of work to manage, look into an Airbnb manager. Like if you're, yes, you may be paying them a portion of the money, but if you're going to make way more money off of that than you would on a long-term rental, then it makes sense.
Yeah. A little bit about outsourcing, not being afraid to. Kirsty, you'll know this. There's a very popular Airbnb out there called A Cabin Down Below. And I just so happened to have built a relationship with them through the podcast. And they had reached out a few weeks ago saying that they were thinking about selling it. And I know how much money they make off of it. And I was very curious as to why that would be. And when they said they actually drive from Halifax to Wentworth to flip it and clean it, get it ready, and they can't do the time anymore because of other priorities, jobs. And I got a coffee with them, and for an hour, I pretty much yelled at them to hire a cleaner. And then that's all for the hour, I was just like, please, like, double your revenue, hire the fucking cleaner, stop being stupid with your time. That's what I did.
We don't even clean ours, and it's in our basement. Handle the commute down the stairs.
We did clean it like I think twice, but it's more like you got to get the system in there so you don't have to do it. And then I guess if we cleaned it, we'd save $80 a turnover. But
yeah. They did hire a cleaner, by the way. Moral of the story, they did.
Oh, good. I'm happy.
Sometimes you just got to get creative. It's like the problem is you got to find a cleaner. It's like, well, there's no cleaning service there. Well, how can you find nobody on Kijiji in the area? Well, can you talk to some neighbors and friends of friends? Like there might be some people around who you just got to knock on a few doors.
Yeah, actually, I worked with a guy who he Airbnb'd out his cottage. I think it was in New Brunswick somewhere, and they just got the neighbor to do the turnovers because it was in sort of a remote area that there wouldn't be a cleaning service.
Amazing. That's it. You have to be creative with these things. Kevin, I don't know if you meant this for me, but it was a direct message. So I'm just going to announce it for the group.
Yeah.
Are you planning to eventually become full-time investors, or will this always be your side hustle?
For me, the goal is to get, I guess, to that like financial freedom. And to just be able to work on projects that like I want to work on and not really have to like use real estate as the way to that I'm sort of taking care of the basis from that side of things. And then from a work perspective, I can go work with companies that I think are doing cool things or cool people who might be in a stage where otherwise if I needed that as my job, it might not make full sense. So I guess maybe if that means a startup type of opportunities. But yeah, that's for me where I'm trying to go with it. Like I like what I do a lot, like a lot. I just don't like the pressures of having to do it all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat. Like we have definitely talked about doing it full time, and I think ultimately I would like to, but I flip flop a lot too because I also enjoy my job work. So yeah. I'm like, maybe I do want to do this. Maybe I do want to stay here.
You can always do 50-50.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think it would probably be a 50-50 split. Like it's having the freedom to not feel like you're tied to your desk or you have to, show up at 9 and leave at 5 and sort of just do the parts that you enjoy.
Yeah. Melissa asks, I'm also looking for properties in Truro, New Glasgow, Kentville, and Bridgewater. It seems like there's a cap for how much properties rent for in these markets and a limit with how much equity you can force into a property. In Truro, for example, it seems like you can buy a single family for $150,000 to $200,000, but most houses that are selling for closer to $300,000, $400,000 are brand new construction. How much equity do you think you can force in a market like Truro? And I'm going to let you guys answer that, but we actually do have a Truro Burr specialist on this forum. So after Cameron and Kaylee give their answer, I'm also going to invite Jacob Geronimo just to give a bit of insight because he's actually in that market every day and give a little more insight as to what they're both seeing, because Cameron and Kaylee and I have been down in Truro for the last few weeks now trying to get some deals together. So I'll leave the floor open for you guys.
That's a great question. Jay, is that not like what I said after the second property we saw on that first trip down to Truro? I was like, I'm just scratching my head on how far, because for us, it was against our sort of traditional thesis here in HRM, like doing the burn and renovating them. So those opportunities we're looking at are, a little bit more like turnkey. But that's also because I don't know the market well enough to have the risk appetite to take all that on. And with that's where I want to turn the mic over to Jacob, because I just want to do that, and there's so much that I need to learn that market before I can give you the full answer.
Jacob.
Yeah, absolutely. I have 4 SFRs in Truro that I run, like single family. And I bought this in 2017. And back then it was very fundamental. I'm buying it and making sure that there's at least 400 to 500 cash flow in them. They're cash flowing really good in 2017, and now it's the value of single family is very emotional driven now. Like good street versus bad street. Like the streets that I always just buy in are just streets that are B class or A class, and they usually appreciate slowly and they're very stable. But we all see what happened with 2020 and 2021, where it's just even the bad, like not the best streets, they're all going above 200, 250. I don't know how to rent those out. Personally, I would never buy anything in Truro that's more than 200 to rent out as a single family because the rent only ranges from 1,200 to 1,500 in a single family house in Truro. So I don't know if that answers your question. You're going to be on a speculative or speculation play if you're going to buy with a very minimal cash flow and just kind of thinking that, oh, Truro's still in the bottom of the market and maybe it's going to go up to 300. So you can, if you want to invest that way, sure, but that's
Yeah.
the play there.
That's why we're looking at just cash flow opportunities in Toronto right now, and the ones we're not looking to put a bunch of work into at all. Mostly because on the flip side of that, my question is how high can the rents really raise as well? Which you said, Melissa, like, is there a ceiling where here in Halifax, you could get a 2 or 3 bedroom with really nice finishes and have that easily rent into the high 2000s?
Right.
Depending where you're at, into the 3000s, you're not going to get that in those other markets. Could you even crack 2,000 on a 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom? I don't know. So then for me, because it's like, the tenants that you'd be marketing to could also then reach into the single family market in a pretty short amount of time with diligent savings. So that's where my head was going, was like, okay,
Right.
the tenants for in here, if they save up for the 2 or 3 years that I'm in here, then they're going to be into the single family market, and I'm just constantly going to have to try and find tenants like that.
Yeah, there's a much lower barrier. It's a lower barrier to enter in the Toronto market. So it's easier for people to buy a house first here in Halifax, where there's probably people who will be renting.
That's me thinking out loud.
Yeah,
Jacob?
no, yeah, that makes sense.
Just a question for you to elaborate more on Melissa's question. How the single family market in Halifax now has gotten so outrageous in terms of what competition is and the bidding and trying to navigate this market. What are you seeing in Truro in terms of like the demand for new single family homes? Is it
The same. It's just on a different like ratio or scale.
Okay.
You can't you can't buy anything here if you don't have cash either. I just sold the property 2 weeks ago. One of my SFRs I put in the market, and it sold really quick on a very high amount as per Truro. And then the one like 3 doors down just put it on the market for like plus 80,000 of what it's worth, and it went to. So even that barrier that you're talking about, the tenant trying to move out and buy a single family, they can't find anything either.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. I was just talking to some of my tenants that rents on my SFR, and you feel bad for them because you want them to transition and buy their house someday. And my rents are very average, and I keep it that way because it's a different play for me. I'm looking for appreciation and stability than the big cash flow. They can't find anything. They can't buy anything. They're just kind of trapped on that like rat race kind of.
Are you seeing price points in Truro go up at the same? Definitely not the same as Halifax. It's like we're going up $11,000, $12,000 a month. But are you seeing the house prices in Truro go up at rates that you guys aren't nowhere familiar with when it comes to the Truro market?
Very much so. Very much so. If you put a percentage amount, it's probably very similar to Halifax. It's just that, say you're going at 20% in Halifax, that would equate to 100,000. To us, it would just equate to like 50,000. But in terms of percentage rate, it's going up like crazy too. It's a big spill from Halifax. There's just a lot of market opinions on why it's happening, but Truro is going nuts too. It's just, yeah.
Okay. I want to touch on that just a little. Sorry, Cameron. I really like where this is going. So when you're in terms of enforcing equity into a home, right? This will go back to Melissa's question. When you're forcing equity into a home through renovation, construction, or purchase and hold it, you can force a lot of more equity into a home if the market's on your side in terms of gains month over month over month. So
Absolutely.
if you're seeing a 20% gain month over month over month, and you understand that your renovations and you outline them to take 3 to 4 months, it's a much easier assessment in terms of forcing the equity gains plus the market plus the renovation. You can get more bang for your buck on the
Yep.
back end, which is why purchasing at the front end in terms of what the market climates are now, you can see a greater return, as Cameron and Kaylee realized after their second burr, if I'm correct, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I buy a property, and this is just my own experience, I always look at the lowest side of the ARV. So it's always the ARV I look at. Say I'm gonna look at this. Oh, the ARV is 150. It can go up to 220, but I always just bet on the 150, so you won't fail. And then the question is, how much cheaper are you gonna get? That's really it. How much cheaper? And do you still have a space for renovation there to achieve that ARV? So it's just really, is it worth it to do it for this much to get this much kind of thing? For example, I'm looking at a property right now. It's super cheap, super cheap. I probably could flip it and renovate it on my own for a month, and I'm getting 20,000. It's a matter of, do I want that 20,000 for me working on it for a whole month? You know,
Yeah.
and the ARV is really low. It's a shit property. You know, it's ugly. But I'm gonna make 20 grand. But do I want it? It's you know what I mean? It's kind of like, is it worth your time?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just pick up more shifts on my main job, and I know what I'm doing there, and there's no risk.
Well, and I love hearing the way that you're framing it, Jacob, like in terms of being able to make it into like a quick, clean decision like that. Like
Very clean, yeah.
You make it with these conservative models in your head, and you can get to some sound decisions by doing that. And if the conservative model still plays out well,
Right.
the risk position is lower, then it's really
Yeah.
can only go up from there. So like
Yeah.
when I'm hearing you talk about the Toronto market and how it's still sort of mirroring a lot of the craziness in Halifax, I'm like, on that question, all I'm thinking in my head is, okay, that's actually de-risking my original conservative stance and making this a better opportunity than where I'm sort of treating it with my initial train of thinking.
Right.
So it's
I do want to get to the next question because we're changing the reference point though. Atara asked, thanks for sharing your experience. Have a question. I am an owner of 2-bedroom condo, fully paid off since 2017. The Halifax area is getting very crowded, noisy. I feel the market is really overpriced. If I would sell and move to a waterfront location, of course, not in the city, but maybe Bedford, I cannot afford keeping current and investing in another condo. What's your advice? I feel I need to hold on to Halifax real estate market normalizes. I think just for the way this is poised in terms of the Halifax market, I feel like this is geared more towards me. So I'm going to answer this from a real estate standpoint and what I'm seeing. In terms of the market getting overpriced, I suppose the common thing about real estate markets in general is that these price points are determined by the buyers. The buyers choose what they pay. That's it. We don't, as realtors, we don't actually set the price. The way real estate pricing works on houses is really simple. Say Cameron and Kaylee want me to sell their house today. I would pull up the comps in the neighborhood comparables and see where they stand compared to what is sold recently. And in this market, I'm probably going to go aggressive with my pricing and go 10, 20 grand over because I understand the demand is there to support this price
Yo,
point.
I got 2 in my building.
Yeah. you got 2 in your building, Emmanuel? So basically what I'm going to say is right now, the fundamentals with real estate markets is supply and demand. Supply is at an all-time low right now. We were talking about this with Graham before the meetup started. I think the condo market right now is we're hovering around 500 units all through all of HRM. HRM being Peggy's Cove, Porter's Lake, Chesapeake, Fall River, Halifax Peninsula, Eastern Passage. If you're talking about HRM, that's kind of the geographical area you're talking about. With the supply being so low and demand being so high, for this market to normalize, the question comes down to, what does normal look like if this is not normal? We've been in this trend now for a year in terms of aggressive overpricing, aggressive competition, pushing up prices. For us to normalize, you have to ask the question of where the market's going to settle, if it does settle, and what has to happen for the market to settle. So for the market to settle, you would need a rush of supply to immediately hit the market and demand to come down a bit, right? Because right now it's the demand from out of province buyers, immigration, first time home buyers coming of age and getting in the market. Demand is, as far as I know, in terms of statistics and immigration, I don't think that that's going to subside over the next few years. We just seem to be getting more and more highlighted as a great place to live. The entry points, we are the last hub in Canada that is well priced. We have entry price points to the rest of the country. So if you're looking from a Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, pick a major city, even Edmonton and Calgary, even though their economy has taken a huge hit with the oil in the last year, they're still priced on par with us, which is really funny because you can still buy a house, sell a house in Edmonton and move here and gain positive equity when they're in a negative equity state. So in terms of all those factors coming into it, I don't see demand subsiding. And for supply's sake, we're talking about homes for sale or condos for sale, they are slapping up condos as quickly as they can. They are slapping up apartment buildings as quickly as they can. If you drive around the Halifax Peninsula, you'll see the craters, they're everywhere. If you, in terms of housing supply, we don't currently have, I don't know of a major subdivision that is currently on par for being ready in the next year or two. So in terms of the single family market, that supply may not be ready for 2, 3, 4 years in terms of building materials, cost of materials, land acquisition, cultivating the land, putting the pads up, getting the foundations in place. Like they can slap up homes pretty quickly nowadays. But to even start the process of going through the red tape with the city and planning a subdivision, I know they're looking at East Hants, Enfield area, but they still haven't broken ground yet on any type of subdivision in that market yet. So we're still waiting on the heavy supply, which means we're going to rely on urban sprawl. Urban sprawl being people now forced to go into Windsor, Truro, out of bounds of the city to find that nice entry point. In terms of the market coming down or settling, I'm comfortable in having my clients write $100,000 offers, $150,000 over asking, because based on what the market's telling me, we aren't coming down or normalizing for at least 2 years. Just based on what I know from the immigration standpoint and the supply standpoint, you would need the only way this market calms down at this point is you bet against the Halifax economy crashing. That is what you're betting against. You would need people to lose jobs and need to sell their house to go move somewhere else to find better jobs, which right now our job creation immigration is putting in new jobs in new places. So Tara, to answer your question in terms of my advice would be, if you can hold it, I'd hold and see if you can talk to your bank into moving into another property, because they'll both be sound investments. If you want to get rid of it, you can get rid of it now and you can buy a more expensive home. And I do believe the market will only forgive you and you'll only see gains in the market over the next few years. And even when the dust settles and this market maybe finally calms down, do we settle at $500,000 average home price, $550,000 average home price, $600,000 average home price? Like, where do we really see this massive escalation settle? Because I don't believe for an instance we're going back down. I don't believe you're going to see an average home price of $400,000 again in Halifax. I don't believe you're going to see $450,000. I believe when we pass 500 in the next month or two, based on the gains, I don't believe you're going to see 500 again. It's just because of what's happening in the immigration development going in HRM. That is my long-winded spiel about that. Does that answer anyone's question about what the market's doing in Halifax? Because we can just say it's fucked. We'll just leave it at that. Anyone have the next question for Cameron and Kaylee? Anyone?
I think there's another one from
Scott.
there's one from Graham here. We'll answer.
Rising housing prices keeping renters out of the market. Do you think that we real estate investors are a factor in the rising prices and keeping others out of the market? I've heard some very negative remarks from some about us speculators keeping them from buying their first homes.
I would say no. I think no, because I think what's driving prices up is people buying with emotion. It's people paying $400,000 over ask price because they want that dream house on the lake. And we don't have any emotion in our buying experience. It's just a transaction. Our goal is to get the lowest price possible. Not we never really offer over ask. So I think, first of all, no, because we're not buying based on emotion. If anything, we're bringing the prices down because we're trying to negotiate the cheapest price we can get. It just helps our cash flow numbers. And then my second comment would be, we are not buying the types of property those people buy. Like, we're only buying multi-unit houses. Like, nobody's buying their first home as a 5-plex. So we're not really playing in the same market as them. And then I guess my third comment too would be, like, we traditionally try and find things off market as well. So we're again not playing in the same, like, with the triplex that we just did our burr on, we found on Kijiji. So I don't think that someone in their first time home purchase is buying their house off Kijiji.
Yeah.
I want to elaborate on that for Graham. In terms of what real estate investors are doing in the market, I actually think if anyone's going to bail us out of this housing crisis, and don't get me wrong, Halifax is in a housing crisis, I actually think it is the real estate investors. And what I mean by that is the real estate investors are the ones who take on all the risk and buy these low untreated houses and bring them up to a standard of living that makes it comfortable more for single families to move into. So you can look at what happened to North End Halifax 10 years ago. A Spryfield's going through it now. North End Dartmouth's going to go through in the next 5 years in terms of these low ignored areas. The Halifax, the real estate investor is the one who goes in and sort of gentrifies and brings up the neighborhood, which then, yes, it brings up the prices of this neighborhood, but you're going to see that anyway, as Kaylee commented on, is what buyers are doing. For example, I had a client recently move from BC. They sold their house, had a lot of cash ready. They did not care what number it went on the paper. They said, what number does it take to get this home? I told them what number, and they wrote it. It set a record for Cole Harbour. They do not care. They need a home by a certain date, and they got it. It's not the real estate investors who are killing the market. Real estate investors, I think, are actually going to pull us out of this. And what the city has done with the 2% rent cap has only stifled investors to go in and fix up crap units and crap homes to become better for more people to rent and live in. Because right now we have had a slumlord problem in Halifax for at least the last 20 years. You go to South End, you're going to see 8, 9, 10, 20 units that are falling apart. Cameron, for example, yesterday we were at a 5-unit where the roof fell off, for God's sake, because of high wind. These slumlords, landlords have taken advantage of what the market has been able to do because it's so forgiving over the last 20 years that now there's so much competition. It takes the real estate investors to get in there to bring up these neighborhoods to what they should have always been, because now you're seeing the cash flow and the money there to support that. So that's my whole little rant on real estate investing and why I think it actually is there to save us from this, because the government can't, the government doesn't have the money to do it. Non-for-profit doesn't have the money to do it. The private sector has the money and the knowledge to do it. The problem is you have to incentivize them to actually put the money where their mouth is, because they care about return on investment. As Cameron and Kaylee said, their criteria is $1,000 net per property. If you're not going to get a return, no good business owner is going to go in there and take on the risk. That's how you go bankrupt. Yeah.
I think it needs to be caught. Like, I love everything you just said. Thank you. And I think it draws another thing that is like, as that lifts up, where do all of those other, where do people start to move out as they look for that price point and they go outside of the city? And I think it calls attention to how important it is for us, and the government and the city to actually come up with strategies that work there around affordable housing, because otherwise, it becomes a whole other problem, really.
Right.
As people buy these properties now, which maybe were mortgage free prior and were rented under market because the owner, they weren't at a loss, but they weren't getting as much as they could. Well, now somebody comes in, buys it, puts a mortgage on it, raises the cost base up. The rents now need to go up just to sustain that cost base. It's nothing to do with the renter. Just transaction has now changed the whole circumstance.
Yeah, and it's always the upfront cost of getting into the market now that drives up the rents, because you have to make it cash flow or else you're never going to purchase it. And if you have the guy who's owned the house or the investment property for 25 years, had a $20,000 mortgage that's paid off, renting out each unit $800, let them go to shit. The acquisition price is now so high with the mortgage, the new investor has to take on the renovation construction, bring it up to standard, but then they have to raise the rents. You can argue about the urban sprawl and say you're forcing more and more, the entry point for first-time home buyers is getting further and further out of the city. I understand that that's awful, and it's hard now because I have clients personally that I work with now, and I've actually told them, you're done. You're out of HRM. I can't. The price points now have gotten so high that there is no point of entry. You don't have the money to compete. when you look at different markets. And we're now down in Windsor looking at a few, and like they are okay with it. And I understand no one likes being pushed out that far, but you're going to see a real growth in terms of what Windsor's going to do and what Toronto's going to do, what Enfield's going to do. You're going to see more and more major city hubs sprout up. And I think that can only be a good thing because Halifax needs this, because we relied on the Halifax Peninsula as a city for so long to carry this province. And I think to see urban sprawl and more places get the love and nurture that they've always deserved. Like Sackville, that Sackville should have been built up years ago, but it was always considered the ugly cousin of HRM, per se, to put it nicely. Now you're starting to see more and more people put real time and effort to build up those communities with greater restaurants, greater businesses, greater people, more money going in. There's good and bad with real estate growth as in any market, and that's just, I wish there was a way that you could have affordable housing, but that's something that the government, nonprofits, and private sector have to come to do. One thing with the podcast we just had on Habitat for Humanity, that'll come out in May, and they're telling, and the chairman was telling me on the air that they work with private investors to acquire properties and land in HRM for lower the cost of what the market is. So they were able to purchase, an acre of land in Spryfield for 50% of the market value, because the private investor understood that it was going for public housing or affordable housing. And they were able to build up 2 duplexes and give them away to people in badly need of it. There are resources available. There are people working at this stuff. It's just having to have everyone come together to make these things come together. Long-winded again. Sorry, I don't mean to take up all the screen time. I know this is about Cameron and Kaylee, not my voice and opinions. I'm coming down. Oh, everyone's just saying that. Oh, okay. Scott, you had a question. Go on, sir.
My question goes back to you have the Airbnb in your this is your principal residence, right?
Yep.
In the basement. And I'll preface this with I have a healthy disdain for CRA, so I'm not this is more of a general question, because I have a vacation home in Parley Beach. How do you deal with the HST?
I'm dealing with it right now, actually. This week I'm meeting with my accountant and we'll figure all that out. But we just started, so I might actually should be asking you more questions there. What should we be looking out for when it comes to
You're not gonna like the few things that I learned, but at the same time, I still have to have a conversation with Jason on this. I still when we were talking about the one in Wentworth there, and you got me thinking about a lot of different things then, right? And you and David, so. But yeah, I just like just being that your principal residence, I like that's would be my concern, is now you're operating something commercial inside your principal residence. So how does that factor into your tax-free growth or capital growth of your principal residence? I don't know what the answer is to that, but until I knew the answer to that, I would not be making it too well. Actually, I assume you're like, how are you getting your tenants? Are you publicly advertising on Airbnb, or are you doing this like
publicly advertising on Airbnb?
Yeah, so because I think that's somewhat creating a paper trail as well that you might be aware of. So
yeah, my mother actually happens to be an accountant, a tax accountant. This is sort of her wheelhouse. I will give you a call though if you'd like, and
absolutely
try seek some of her opinion on it, because I mean, we might have to be paying more tax than we think, but
love to talk to you more about it. Okay.
When it comes to that, and like that part of the house hack as well, like for our model's sake, like that's just icing on the cake for us. Like we don't factor any of that into the opportunity. I would be, and we're not looking at anything that is like a targeted Airbnb type of property. I do a lot more homework before I would do that, but I do think that there's something there, just based off what I'm seeing on some of these takes, and heck, even some of the stays I'm making in Nova Scotia. Maybe Avery would be, well, Avery's running a whole commercial business there, but I don't know, is there anybody else? Jason is running like a few Airbnbs sort of personally.
The only I don't know that many people in the market. I know Avery Birch, who actually runs a business out of Airbnb. He was scaled it, but he doesn't own any of the properties, which is kind of like the aloof of his business. He doesn't actually run them out of things that he owns.
Ah.
You'd have to, I would recommend maybe, I can put you in touch with Liam Hennessy, the owner of a cabin down below, and ask what his taxes are, Scott, because he kind of is in the same situation as you, where it's not, the Airbnb is not in your personal residence, but they've had a function Airbnb for at least the last 2 years to see where that could go. I'll get you in touch with them so you can pick their brain as well, because I know you're not liking the answers you're getting from your guys. We've already talked about this conversation.
Oh, no, well, actually, I didn't even. I held off because we let our tenant, our long-term tenant, our winter tenant out there at the end of March.
Yeah.
And so we were going to short-term rent it, and then we just kind of stepped back, and thankfully, actually, my good friend of mine, he's a construction manager for a refrigeration company, and he needed a place for 2 months. They're doing a Fresh Mart job up in some close to Shediac anyway. It's really, really close. So he's actually going to, as soon as the border opens the 19th, they're renting it for 2 months. So
yeah,
they'll be okay. Yeah. So we're still on the long term. If you want to call 2 months long term, we're calling it that anyway.
If it's longer than 30 days, it's considered a long-term lease.
Yeah.
Just by
Longer than 3 days. Longer than 3 days.
30, 30, 30.
I was gonna say 3. I was half excited when you said 30 because we're only renting it weekly in the summer. So
the
Melissa, I don't know if you have anything that you can share from a tax perspective on it, but it sounds like you got some good experience there too.
Well, I don't own any of the properties that I run on Airbnb, but basically, so for me, I claim my income as like a sole proprietor. I claim all my expenses, like my rent, and I kind of just claim it as like business income. It's not rental income. And another thing with Airbnb, which I'm sure you know, but if you have stays that are shorter than a month, you have to remit HST. So that's another kind of expense to think about. So I think kind of with my situation, since I don't own the properties, I'm not putting a lot into capital gains or anything. I'm not really thinking about what would happen if I had to then sell the house, because I have read some stuff on like some Airbnb forums where people rent out their residence on Airbnb. They put a lot of work into it. And then when they go to sell, maybe they have to like pay something or sell it as a commercial prop or something, since they were running a business out of it. I don't know how that works exactly.
So the way my accountant explained it to me was like, this is a possibility. Like this is kind of so new in the kind of, well, I say so new in the long-term kind of ownership range, right? Is like, what if I said, well, what if we rented it? The first question was, we're going to long-term rent in the winter because it's right at the beach. I mean, it really doesn't have a short-term attraction in the winter. So, we will probably make twice as much money in the 3 months in the summer as we do all winter. But the majority of the use is long-term, and so they really don't even know what that definition is yet either. But one thing I said is, well, what if in 10 years we just decide we just want to keep it for ourselves and not rent it anymore? And their initial interpretation of that is that would be a deemed disposition, and we'd have to pay HST on the market value at that point in time. So we paid $166,000 for it last year, and if it's worth 310 years, we'd have to pay 45 grand in HST just to make it a personal residence.
Is it held within a company though, or do you own it personally?
We own it personally, but that was another consideration just because of the convoluted way I do. Like, I do things really, really like I do everything possible to avoid tax. So we may actually flip it into a company, because what I did is I borrowed from my company to buy it. I paid cash for the cottage. So I borrowed from my company that I get supposed to pay back this year. I can get rid of having to pay that back if I flip it into another company. And then just write a note to myself. So I just learned that like a couple of days ago. I was like, okay, that makes some sense. That's going to save me about whatever 30 grand in dividend tax or whatever, right? So
yeah,
so, yeah. So this is definitely a fluid situation, right?
Stay up to date with Scott.
What's that?
So I might need to give you a deeper call on my
yeah, for sure.
questions.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I will bring an accountant on next time in case this goes left like this again. Before we get out of here, guys, because I got to wrap this up because I have to go do wedding stuff. My fiance's been nagging me for a month now to get on that. Is there anyone have any? Yeah, thank you, Scott. Does anyone have any more questions? Last question for Cameron and Kaylee before I get out of here. And feel free just to go on, open up your mic and ask away, and we'll wrap this up. Anyone? Any humans? No.
No, definitely. Yeah. So I see a bunch of names. I've met a couple of these people before, but I'll be looking. I don't know if everyone here is on LinkedIn or whatever. I'll be looking these up to connect. And Cameron, yeah. So I don't know if you already have my contacts on your Jason's podcast thing as well. So
thank you.
Awesome.
Is the thing.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up and call it a day. For anyone that wants to come back to this conversation, I will actually be releasing the audio on the Halifax Real Estate podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and I'll also be releasing the video on YouTube, so you guys have a frame of reference. If you want to get in touch with Cameron and Kaylee, their contact information is on the Halifax Real Estate podcast in details. If you want to talk to Scott, Scott's actually episode 20, so his contact information is there as well. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, social media. You can find me on the podcast. My phone number is available all there. If anyone wants to connect to each other, I think I know everyone in here except Antonio and Otera. So if you do want to connect to anyone, feel free just to give me a quick text or a message and I can connect these people up. Once again, thank you all so much for coming. Cameron and Kaylee, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always a pleasure to see you guys. I will say, Cameron, before Graham goes, you should talk to Cameron. Graham, talk to Cameron. Cameron, talk to Graham. You guys remember how I mentioned there's someone who comes to this that does a Burr play in Hamilton?
Yeah.
Graham. So I know you guys are in that market as well.
Forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for all the time. Thank you all so much for coming. Have a great day, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye. Looking forward to staying connected with you all.